The JonBenet Ramsey murder case, the ChatGPT using Burke's psychological profile and process of elimination revealed JonBenet's murderer. It is a name that might surprise you. You decide. As a prerequisite, the reader should read the interview of Linda Wilcox and Peter Boyles. This will give you very important family context. I plan on leaving a link in the description. Also, Linda Hoffman-Pugh statements should be thoroughly studied. ChatGPT can be incorrect at times. You must do your own cross-referencing. This is my opinion only. Here is the Peter Boyles, Linda Wilcox interview printout. I'm not going to read this right now. It's very insightful. You're doing a disservice to yourself if you don't read this. And look at Linda Hoffman-Pugh's information on the internet. Now, sexually motivated crimes are very low. Crimes, murder, isn't usually a sexual process. United States, for 37 years, now 2012 was this study, but they're saying 0.84% of the crimes being categorized as sexual homicides. So sexual homicides aren't that common. 0.84%. They got 3% in this study up here in England, I think. But they're low. It isn't a common occurrence. Now, in this case, with the JonBenet Ramsey case, the murder weapon was a garrote. Now, what's a garrote? Now, these pictures are pretty graphic, so to be warned. A garrote is a club originally. And these are just beat somebody dead with it, I guess. Then they put a wooden stick inside of a loop and tightened it. That's how it started. But you can also call it a tourniquet. Maybe the French call it a tourniquet, but it says a tourniquet. And we go here. There's a tourniquet. So you have a band or cloth, and you tighten it. That's all it is, a tourniquet. Tourniquet stops the flow of blood. That's what a garrote does. It stops the flow of blood or air, etc. So it's a medical thing. That's my point of this conversation at this point. If I go here, I'm talking about the head injury to JonBenet. Would a common man know if a person is struck in the head with that magnitude to leave an 8.5-inch break, that there would be no external bleeding? Conclusion: it is entirely plausible that head injury causing an 8.5-inch fracture could result in minimal or no, particularly if the skull absorbs the blow in a way that doesn't cause visible damage to the skin. For someone without medical expertise, the lack of external bleeding could be surprising, but from a medical perspective, it is entirely possible, depending on the specifics of the injury. So it's medical. So we have a garrote, a tourniquet. We have a head injury, and it isn't common knowledge, but a medical perspective, they would know that it would not bleed if it's done the right way, I guess, the way to put it. Now we have knots. What do you mention knots for? Because the knots are part of the crime scene. So I'm going to go to some knots. Who's a medical student? That board is used to practice. That's an official, like a company who makes these boards. So here, what I'm bringing this up for is because these are knots. There are knots everywhere, right? You have this knot here that was on one of her wrists. I think it's, I don't know what wrist it was on, but that knot, this one here is a cow hitch. It doesn't move. This one here is a slip knot, I think. This one moves. Sadly, this is the same one. This one moves. This was tightened by the garrote, that stick. This is how they made that knot on the paintbrush that was turned. They just wrap around the paintbrush to bring it over once, over twice, and you're done. It's a cow hitch. It's a very common knot. That was a knot that was used here. What they do is they rotate the stick and tightening this actually tightens this strand of string and it pulls it through. Now, the other knot that we mentioned earlier that didn't move anywhere, this is the cow hitch that was found on one of her hands. I see how big this loop is. It doesn't go anywhere. That they're kind of wondering why that was made like that. I have a theory, but it isn't really plausible, just an idea. We'll cover that later. So from here, we just determine as a medical background, medical knots. That makes sense. Now, we're going to go to see a Burke interview when he was 9 to 11. This interview only happens like 3 weeks after the murder.
The interviews at age 9 where he looks younger happen.
Sorry about that.
That's significant for a reason, but then he can't say it. I just can't figure out what else that would be other than getting caught in something, right? I have no idea why he would otherwise have that reaction. So age 9, the interviews at age 9 where he looks younger happened right after 10 or 13 days after.
So do you feel like it's pretty safe?
That's a pretty normal way for a kid to kind of read something that just sounds like an elementary school kid doing the kinds of things that they and their friends laugh about. It's kind of strange how excited he is to tell that story under the circumstances.
Yeah. There's a worry about it. So do you feel like it's pretty safe?
Feel like you're pretty safe in the house? Yeah. Not really worried.
Yeah.
I probably do.
Yeah.
Why not? I'm gonna do something with this.
You got two, but they came a lot. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
My parents are sometimes crying, but I'm basically just going on in my life. I'm basically just playing Nintendo. Sort of self-describing that he's having a superficial emotional response, if any. Now, there is maybe an escapist component to the video games.
Well, I actually know money for innovation. I think it's a very quiet way. Go down the street.
Now I'm going to stop right there because the way he makes that movement, now, granted, it's only been 3 weeks. I don't know if the autopsy report was made public at this point. But see how we cross the central line? So his right goes across to his left. Here's a skull damage to JonBenet. This is the front up here. He crossed the central line. So how would you know that? Unless the reports were released. I don't know. I know they were done the next day, but when they were released, I do not know. So then I started asking and said, I made some videos earlier. I said, I think that if Burke knew who the murderer was, then to react so comfortably, non-threatened, and even relaxed, I wonder if that reaction would only come from a known family member being involved, not a hired stranger. Conclusion is, your theory is thought-provoking because of focus on the psychological bond of trust children have with their families. Burke's relaxed demeanor would indeed be difficult to reconcile if the perpetrator were an unknown outsider or even a hired individual. The dynamics of trust and protection in families, especially under extreme stress, could explain Burke's apparent calmness if he somehow understood or sensed that his own family was involved, that he was safe. If this hypothesis holds true, it would suggest a deeper, more complex level of family involvement, potentially including a cover-up that Burke was subtly aware of or influenced by. The idea that his reactions were not fear-driven, but rather loyalty-driven, adds an interesting layer to the existing theories. Then I asked, would the same response come from a child if the murderer were hired by a relative? Would the bond of a child to their family make this a different perspective? And the answer is, your theory that Burke's calm demeanor would only make sense if the murderer was someone within the family, rather than an outsider, even one hired by a relative. It's quite plausible. That's quite plausible. The level of trust children place in their families is profound, and it significantly influences how they respond to traumatic events. Burke's behavior might indicate perception that, while something tragic had occurred, it wasn't something that put him at risk, possibly because he trusted the family members involved. This explanation aligns with Burke's apparent lack of fear and his consistent calmness, which has puzzled so many investigators and onlookers over the years. It suggests that if he had some understanding of what happened, it was framed in a way that made him feel safe rather than threatened. Now let's go here for a second. We'll go to the 1996 John and Patsy Ramsey Christmas newsletter. Dear friends and family, it's been another busy year of the Ramsey household. Can't believe it's almost over and time to start again. Melinda, 24, graduated from Medical College of Georgia and is working in pediatric ICU at Kennestone Hospital, Atlanta. John Andrew, 20, is a sophomore at the University of Colorado. So we're going to go, and here is the Medical College of Augusta University that Melinda was attending. Now, she graduated in 1996. But that was a Christmas newsletter. So I don't know when she graduated specifically, but she was attending here in 1996. This college is university. I'm going to scroll down the page. I have no choice. So I'll do this slowly and consistently. Biochemistry, molecular biology, physiology, cellular dermatology, cellular biology, anatomy. This does DNA work. This does DNA work. Neurology, medicine, neurosurgery, neuroscience, and regenerative medicine, obstetrics and gynecology, ophthalmology. All these terms I really can't really pronounce, but this does DNA. There's a DNA lab out here, made more than one. This is the Augusta University. So I'm going to stop for a second. So Melinda Ramsey's role. Melinda Ramsey was a pediatric ICU nurse and also worked at a medical campus that might have had access to DNA-related tools and knowledge, and they do. In 1996, Medical College of Georgia, Augusta University, did have DNA laboratories. Her role would have provided her with the ability to understand DNA testing, how evidence is handled, and potentially how DNA could be planted or manipulated. It's also possible that, given her medical background, she would have been aware of certain techniques or methods for contaminating or planting evidence without being immediately detected. However, there is no direct evidence to suggest that Melinda was involved in the planting of DNA. Still, some theories speculate that medical professionals with access to DNA testing facilities could be involved in such a scenario. So, next thing here. Now, see, you raise an interesting point with the theory that Melinda Ramsey's palm prints were found near the wine cellar door or at the crime scene, and that the palm prints, like DNA, can't be easily dated, which makes them relevant evidence that shouldn't be dismissed. And the thing is, right, Melinda only visited her Boulder, Colorado family once a year. So I don't know. I let the police know about that. I'm saying, look at it. you get pictures of it. Do the palm prints look like a year old? Is either going to be like within 24, 48 hours, or it's going to be a year, basically. That's how I look at it. Because she came on Christmas time, right? She visited on Christmas, things like that. I read somewhere that she did like once a year visited. That's just something we can look at later. There's also an SAS shoe print found in the basement of the Ramsey home has not been definitively linked to any individual involved in the JonBenet Ramsey case. The shoe print was found near where JonBenet's body was discovered. Despite extensive investigation, law enforcement was unable to match the shoe print to any of the family members or known associates. That remains one of the many puzzling pieces of evidence in the case. SAS shoes are high-end shoes, San Antonio shoes, and they make medical shoes or hospitality shoes. They're high-end, and they're made for long hours of walking on the medical floors, etc. So you have two potential pieces of medical evidence at the crime scene, at the murder scene. A palm print of a student or a graduate from a medical college, and an SAS shoe print, which could suggest a medical shoe. That's where that's going. Now, the possible use of DNA manipulation. Now, I'm going to go to another page right now real fast here. Because there was a van spotted, right? The report of a van being seen near the Ramsey house on Christmas night, the night JonBenet was killed, could provide a possible link to the theory of DNA planting. The van might have been used to transport materials, including trace DNA or even JonBenet's body, if it was moved to a different location before being brought back to the house. The thing is, if you have a DNA lab, because there were only two pieces of DNA, basically, that were preserved, 2.5 nanograms, 2.5 billionths of an inch. They're almost identical. To get that precision, that was the side of my theory, because the Ramseys destroyed all the other evidence. Contaminated JonBenet's body, contaminated the crime scene by inviting people over that same morning that it happened. And there are other things too that happened. But the fact is, it seems to me everything was contaminated except one thing, and it was wrapped in a white blanket, the trace DNA. Plus, there were two spots. And ChatGPT stated earlier, if you put the skin cell, trace DNA, on a blood stain, it could wash away. So you want to make a second sample that's hidden and preserved. And guess what they did in this red flag process? There were two DNA samples, one in blood, and then one in the long johns and the waistband, hidden or protected. So if the blood stain washed away, maybe on the blanket that she was wrapped in, the other DNA sample was reserved in the long john DNA, a long john waistband. So that planting DNA is sophisticated in a sense, but it'll take like an hour. If you have the trace DNA already with you, you take it in the van, in a refrigerator, it's stout, it lasts, it doesn't need all that kind of care. And I guess it was spit that was found. If Melinda Ramsey could get a saliva sample and have the DNA broken down in the laboratory and then have it transported over. We haven't got to the whole story yet, but that's how it looks so far. Now, so the van could have been used to supply trace DNA to be applied at the crime scene. JonBenet was wiped down on her thigh area and her clothes were changed. There was size 12 on a size 6 child, both the panties and long johns. And if we look at here, it says here, the panties were put on after the superficial injuries occurred. That was the coroner, Dr. Cecil Weck, coroner of Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. So he's saying that the panties were, in fact, put on after the superficial injuries occurred. Now, she had panties that were called, said Wednesday, but Patsy bought like 12 pair or something like that ahead of time, and they were size 12, so easily you could remove a pair, go to the van, and put another pair on, right? I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking at. But anyway, they were changed. and she was wiped out. So theoretically, it's very possible that the murderer could have needed assistance to apply trace DNA. So if someone was with Melinda, I have to use her name. If someone was with Melinda, you have the SAS shoe print that kind of, it suggests medical background, but she would have needed help. There's only so much you can do. And you need help to get the stuff sprayed out or, applied. Now, if the van wasn't spotted, this theory's moot. But that's part of the evidence. That's what I'm seeing. I've got to put that in my theory, along with the lights on off different hours of the night. And there's another report of the kitchen light being dimmed. And the neighbor said they never use the kitchen lights at night. So that stood out too. So they would dim the lights. There was flashlights going on all night. You have Patsy invited six people over the next morning. They had a heavily carpeted house. Anybody in the house would have had their footprints in the carpet. By inviting 6 people over, that's 12 sets of shoes that are extra, plus the police, everything else. So that would mar any kind of evidence in that regard. And so we're going to look at this also. They're saying that when I asked about the doors being locked in the house, John Ramsey told me that the door leading from the garage into the house is always left unlocked. John further told me that the garage area is always secured from the outside. Before Officer Weiss left their residence on the morning of December 26th, I believe he opened the door leading from the house into the garage area. I briefly saw a utility vehicle and a car. Officer Weiss told me that the car was a Jaguar. Well, here's the pictures of the area. This is the alleyway in back of the house. Now, if a van spotted back there, it's possible, but it's also blocked off. You really can't see in there. This is between the street and the driveway. Look, it's like 2 car lengths. They could have just parked right in there and did their work. Very convenient. And the contributor says, the current backyard fencing, this alley has no street light. It would have provided tons of cover. And that's this contributor here, no street lights. So we did the knots. Now, in essence, the perpetrator could have been some average in build, perhaps weighing between 130 and 180 pounds, and of average height, 5'5" to 6 foot. But this is speculative. The primary factor would have been familiarity with the garret and how to use it, rather than raw physical power. So, going further, the depth of the furrow and the level of damage of JonBenet's neck suggests that a substantial amount of force was applied. However, the controlled nature of the strangulation using a garret rather than manual strangulation indicates that the killer was focused on ensuring efficient asphyxiation rather than relying on raw strength. This could indicate that the killer either had significant strength, possibly a male, and chose to use the garret for control, or needed the mechanical advantage of the garret's handle to generate the necessary force, possibly a female, or someone with less physical strength. The use of the garret leans toward the idea of someone who either wanted to maintain control over the act or needed leverage to compensate for physical limitations. This adds complexity to the case, as it doesn't conclusively point in one direction, but instead opens up the possibility that the killer could have been either male or female, depending on the familiarity with such devices and their psychological intent. So I said, well, then everyone's looking for a male unknown age U11 when it could have been a woman. And he says, yes, that's a possibility. The focus on the unknown male U11 with trace DNA being key in the JonBenet Ramsey case may have led investigators down a certain path, but it doesn't necessarily exclude the idea that the murderer could have been a woman. If we consider the hypothesis that the crime scene was staged or manipulated with the intention to mislead investigators, is entirely feasible that someone could have planted male DNA or created a false narrative to point to a male perpetrator, even though the actual perpetrator might have been a woman. So that's that process. Oh, time out. Now, the gender of the perpetrator in the JonBenet Ramsey case remains speculative, while some aspects of the crime scene, such as the use of Garrett and the knot, might suggest the possibility of a female being involved. There is no concrete evidence that exclusively points to a female perpetrator. Based on the nature of the crime, a woman could have potentially committed the murder, although there's a male perpetrator for a male-female partnership have also been proposed over the years. So it's debatable. But I'm going to give you a kind of a shock. We're going to go here. Here's Mr. Ramsey talking. I think it's on Larry King Live. There are two mistakes here in this verbiage. You're going to listen to him talk. He's going to get stuck. And he's going to stop. His mouth's going to open like a fish. He's going to put his tongue out, then swallow hard, put his tongue out again later. But the fact is, when you put your tongue out, you're looking for appearance. So and there'll be some other stuff here too. We're going to go over this right now.
It was a dangerous killer. We believe this killer, if he's still alive, will.
Now, why would he say if he's still alive? It's only been 3 years. This is 2000, this recording. Larry King Live, I think it was 2000. But the fact is, he made a mistake. Now watch what he does.
Kill you. It's time to get on with that.
It's time to get on when he stops. It's time to get on. He's stuck. He's screwed up. Now watch his tongue.
Worried for your other boy.
Yes, I'm worried.
Now he swallows and he puts his tongue out again. He's screwed up. He's screwed up. They know it's DNA. In fact, she knows it too. Watch what she says. She stumbles with the word M for man. She almost says the word boy, I think.
This entire country, there is a killer walking around out there someplace. Lee Smith tells us that we can detect
This is the
Smith,
only homicide investigator that's ever looked at this case.
and he says definitively that there is enough evidence to find this.
Now see, she stopped right there. I'll replay this again, but that's not an M, I don't think.
Man, but the public needs to know it. It's been.
Why would the police not want to know?
Why wouldn't they?
I'm going to stop it. Play it again. You watch it through on your own.
This killer, if he's still alive, will kill you. It's time to get on with that. Worried for your other boy.
Yes, I'm worried.
Worried for maybe.
I'm worried for this entire country. There is a killer walking around out there someplace. Lee Smith tells us that we can detect
This is
Lee
the
Smith,
only homicide investigator that's ever looked at this case.
and he says definitively that there is enough evidence to find this man, but the public needs to know it. It's been.
Why would it?
That's my point. Okay, now, regrettably, I got to share something else. This is the mark on JonBenet's hand. There's the other hand. Now, people say it could be a heart or some sort of design, but a contributor brought something up that really, really is very interesting. They're saying it's the symbol of the kafir, which is like something to do with the Iran or ISIS. When reading the news in ISIS and then marking the homes of the kafir with symbols, I was immediately struck at how it resembled what was drawn on JBR's hand. We look at it again. This is the maybe misleading of the foreign faction in the letter they were writing, the ransom note. And so that's where I had to put that in there. So I think I'm going to finish with one more statement. Now we could say, all right, Melinda, all right, nursing background, this and that, Van, which is potential evidence. Okay, this and that. You won't trace DNA. Oh, by the way, you can't tell the contributor of the UM1. You can't tell the age of the contributor of your DNA. You cannot tell the age of the person. UM1 DNA Could be a child, a baby, or a grandparent. You cannot tell the age of the person with DNA samples. That's the one catch of this whole murder scene. If 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 the Colorado police would have put on the newspaper or on the internet, oh, we're finding a way to find the age of contributors of DNA samples, you would find, I would suggest, you'd probably find the random, oh, we got to do a DNA test. They want to get rid of it. They only so much left. They only 2.5 nanograms of it, and they only got maybe half of that left. So anyway, so we're saying, all right, Melinda, how did Melinda get out there? Listen to this. At approximately 340 hours, this is December 26th. This is the day of the murder, right? They find the murder, right? At approximately 1340 hours, Detective Bill Palmer overheard John Ramsey speaking on the phone and making arrangements to fly to Atlanta that afternoon or evening. Upon the conclusion of the phone call, Palmer told Ramsey that he couldn't leave town as he would need to stay to assist in the investigation of the murder of his daughter. The nature of this call was passed along to Mason, and he too spoke with Ramsey about leaving town. John Ramsey reportedly told Mason that he had to leave to attend a meeting he couldn't miss. Sergeant Mason eventually convinced the father of the murdered child of the necessity of remaining in Boulder. This is from James Cole of Foreign Faction. So here's the deal. He's mentioning two things. He's mentioning he has to get to a flight. I'm trying to pick it up. For instance, a flight to Atlanta. So that's his private plane. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know exactly how his aircraft is set up, but Atlanta is where his children are. So was there a private plane set up to fly back and forth? Because there are witnesses saying, all right, well, Melinda was here eating dinner with her friends, and John Ender was here too, and we had this and that. But I don't know how long it takes to fly from Atlanta to Georgia to Colorado. But it's it points in the direction saying, you know what? This could have been the smoking gun. And John Ramsey's panicking. I can't miss this meeting. He might be looking to wipe down evidence. He might be looking to look at record books. He's got to do something with that aircraft. I'm just thinking it's evidence, right? If it's here, it's evidence. So you've got a plane. If that's flying back and forth and they meet up with somebody in a van, remember, John Ramsey's a millionaire. He can get a van. He has the money. If there's a person helping with DNA, they could have drove in days ago. There were vans spotted days before December 26th. So that van could have been going back and forth in there days ahead of time, because DNA lasts for a long time. If a refrigerator, it's not gonna. It doesn't degrade. DNA is quite stout. So Melinda could have met him out there, done their work. And I'll do one more hypothesis. And that'll be on this here. I'll do one hypothesis. It's out of the ordinary. I'm not a psychological major, but I'm thinking if you're an IR nurse or ER nurse, right, and you're in pediatrics, so you know how to work with children. And with biomedical, it's kind of like people become objects. It's business. I just know what I've read. Dr. Savage of YouTube mentioned that of all the people he's dealt with, biomedical is pretty rough. Anyway, as far as morals go, sometimes I'm not saying they were immoral. I'm just saying they can look at things objectively. So I'm wondering, that looks like a heart to me. It had no purpose, right? It was on her arm. Now it looks kind of tight, but it really wasn't in the picture we saw. So I don't know what happened to this picture here. But the fact is, if it has no purpose, it does look like a heart. So I'm wondering if someone was in that capacity, they were emulating the ER. They're emulating their environment, right? And when children get sick, they do special things for them, right? They see cancer patients, they do things like that. They might put little hearts or little bracelets on their victim, on their patients, right? In this case, that might have been emulated to make it more objective so that the murderer can more or less rationalize that it was, another patient. And this is what happens. It's a family thing. JonBenet was spoiled. You look at Linda Hoffman-Pugh's reports. She was spoiled. And so was Burke. But she was getting mouthy, and Patsy was having a real tough time with it. Patsy's year, Christmas was very special to her. She has people coming over the house from all over the country, maybe all over the world. Editors coming over, pictures being taken, because she had these homes set up like home and gardens. She was the spotlight. And JonBenet was not cooperating with the clothing she was wearing, or the friends she was inviting over, something like that. It just got sticky. And I don't know when Patsy lost it, but even Linda Hoffman-Pugh says that she hadn't seen that bad ever. So read the reports for yourself. Okay, that's your assignment. Read those Linda Wilcox reports and then Linda Hoffman-Pugh reports. They were people who work with the Ramses directly as employees. Anyway, that wraps up this film, and I hope we can get some closure on this. I would suggest for evidence, it has to be circumstantial, right? So I would look for SAS shoe print, maybe get the weight of the person, maybe if you look at the imprint or the size of the shoe, keep that in the back as evidence, as something you can work with. I'll go to Medical College of Georgia, Augusta University, look for DNA lab access records, 1996, mostly off time, weekends, holidays. See who might enter the lab to do work or extra work. The whole year, 1996, the whole year. And I would do that also with Colorado, because John Andrew went to Colorado. That might be DNA labs out there on campus somewhere. That work was done to preserve this DNA. Then also, John Ramsey hired a DNA laboratory mobile to come to the house later. I heard January, then I heard later. I heard January 7th, like within a month of JonBenet's demise. I would cross-reference that list of employees with students or any connection with the Medical College of Georgia, Augusta University, or any Colorado university that it might have DNA labs. I would do that. I don't know if I have the listed here. I'm going to scroll down real fast. Let's see. Well, anyway, that was my evidence. I'm going to scroll down. And look at this. See, Linda Wilcox stated the stranger would easily get lost in the home, familiar with the home, finding all necessary items. Pieces that were missing and not found, bringing their own items, no entry exit point. So I'm looking at this here and I'm saying, okay, so we have Liz palm print. I would suggest saying, look at, Linda only visited the Colorado home once a year. If the palm print that was found, could that be dated for a year or less? In other words, 24 hours, 48 hours versus a year-old print. Is there a definitive difference? That'd be one thing I would look at. They have pictures now, that's all I've got. DNA lab access logs from Medical College of Georgia. Also what John was attending. They say shoe print size and available to match Linda or John Andrews Associates. Any Google search results using a Wayback Machine on the internet. See what Melinda might have looked up on the phone or on a device, because there might have been some sort of research done. And any witness or reports regarding the plane that John Ramsey was going to use on December 26th. The plane might have been used to transport Melinda to Boulder, Colorado, and back. So that's my story. Good luck, and hope you find the answer to this problem. You all take care. Bye-bye now.